Based on your experience, what fears often keep your clients stuck, even when they know it's not right for them to continue the path that they are on?
Yeah. I think a big one is just that honestly, it's like really scary because you don't know what it's going to be like next, right? Like if I decided, "Oh man, I'm going to drop this whole investment that I've been in something that I've been doing for years and years, what am I going to do next?" Right? Like, well, what happens if I don't make it in that next career? A career pivot is scary because you don't there's no guarantee that you're going to get a job that maybe is paying as well. Maybe you won't get the praise that you used to get from friends or for family members for this new career that you want to be in. You have to maybe even start over, right?
This is the Asian Rebel Club podcast, a space for the ones who grew up chasing approval and are now learning how to be free. I am Crystal Ren, entrepreneur, creative, and recovering achievement addict. Each week, we dive into honest conversations with Asian rebels, rewriting what success, identity, and freedom really mean. If you're ready to live your story, not somebody else, welcome home. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Crystal. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. Would you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jessica Lan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist or a mental health therapist in the United States in California. I work with primarily Asian and Asian Americans who are looking for just some extra support in whatever might be going on in their lives.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your introduction. You are the first mental health professional we have on my show, and I'm really excited to have you here. I have a gazillion questions for you. So let's start with a very hard question that I have spent a lot of time thinking about. Why do so many high achieving Asians wake up one day and realize that they're on a path they don't want? Like, for example, going to medical school and law school, yet still feel frozen to leave it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's maybe like half the people that I work with kind of wake up one day, and it might not even just be like, oh, you wake up one day and you feel a certain type of way, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like this building feeling inside of you. And then one day it just becomes a little too much. And what happens, I think, is we are often like raised to want to be like stable and safe. And I think the messaging around like, what we do for work and what kind of career field we get into, it's very like all about kind of how much we make and how stable of a job it is and how secure it'll be in the future. And a lot of that is around like feeling safe. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think what happens is we get into this career field that we feel is like safe and secure. But it's not necessarily what we really like inside.
Yeah.
And so it can be when we are doing something every single day that we might not really like to be doing, it wears on us and it creates like stress and we become like burnt out. And then one day we wake up and we think like, do we really like what we're doing?
Yeah.
And I think it takes so long to get there sometimes because it's been the safe option. It's a secure option, right? We don't have to worry about if we're making money, if we have stable income or stable living, if we're meeting like our own like lifestyle needs. Then it's not really like this huge problem until one day the feelings of like stress and like unhappiness, they build and build and build. And we're like, whoa, this might be a problem.
Right, right. And when did you usually observe that's the period of time that, maybe a client come in and be like, I have this problem? Is it, pre-medical school, in the middle of it or after medical school? When was a time when the person was like, oh, fuck, like, I'm not sure if I want to be on it any longer?
Yeah, it's like two different. I think it's like for me what I've observed and what I've experienced, it's like kind of two different like phases in life. One is like when we're in college, when we're like majoring in something in school and university and we're studying it and maybe we've studied it, for a year, for 2 years and then I think people realize I actually don't think I like what I'm studying. And like, do I
Mm-hmm.
really want to be pre med? Do I really want to go to med school or grad school? Do I really want to be a doctor? Do I really like science and math? Right.
Yeah.
So it's in university. And I think sometimes because when we're like pre med in university or when we're studying for a certain, like if we're studying for like law school and we're on that track, we're forced to take like a lot of these classes, right? Your second and your third year in your upperclassmen years, you're kind of forced to take more specific classes for that career. And then we realize, ooh, we don't really like these classes, or we're not good at this. Like I'm trying my best, I'm doing my best, but for some reason I'm still like struggling. Right. And so there's that uh-oh moment. And then the second like phase in life is maybe like when we've been in that career for a few years now. And that can be anywhere from like late 20s to even like early mid 30s. We've been doing it for a little bit, and then it just builds, like that stress builds and builds and
Mm,
builds to the point where we're like questioning, I don't know if this is for me. And I've only been doing this maybe for like 4 years. And why am I so stressed already? Why am I so burnt
mm.
out? Do I really like this? And can I do
Yeah.
this for longer? If I'm feeling this way after a few years, can I do this for 10 more years, 20 more years?
Yeah.
That's when that kind of second round comes in.
Okay, so I have a bunch of questions around that, but the first question is like, I wonder what's the difference between these two kinds of people's mentality, right? Because it seems like the second kind of was it because the second kind of people they actually like studying the subject, they just didn't like the application of it in the real life. That's why they powered it through the entire time, or was it because like they just powered it through because like they're a good student, they're like good. I don't know, like daughter son, and until they one day they're like, I just can't go on anymore.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes it's a mix of both, but in terms of like that second wave of, oh, when we're questioning it like a few years into our career, I think what it is, and it could be different for everyone, but I think what happens is like we're so used to being, a lot of people are high achieving when you're going into like pre-med, or you're on the med track, or when you're on the law track, or even like kind of big tech, like, or business, like to some extent we're used to being kind of high achieving students,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
so when we're high achieving students, or when we're doing good, like in school academically, it's usually like pretty fine. Maybe it's a little harder, maybe it's not, but it's school, right? It's not, a lot of times you're not really day to day doing the job. But I think what happens is like when you really live out that career and you're doing it every single day, and it's no longer based on academia. Like we're not
Yeah.
students anymore, right? So
Yeah.
it then
Like that's
becomes,
this is it. Like, you're not gonna have any hope like this is going to be anything different, or like you don't really have a different future, like this is going to be your life.
yeah. And then exactly. So you kind of start questioning, like, am I okay with this being the rest of my life if I'm doing
Yeah.
this day in and day out?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. And I wonder that when these two group of people coming to you, what's their concerns and how do they differ from each other?
Yeah. It's a bit different because the people that are coming to me when they're in school and university, it's a little bit of a different time. If we think about when we were in school,
Yeah.
there's a little bit more of like you're discovering yourself, you're learning more about yourself. There's a little bit more freedom, right? There's not so much responsibility of like paying all these different types of bills.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not even paying rent, right? There's a little bit more support, a little bit more financial support. So there's a little bit more freedom to, I think, learn about what you like and what you don't like. So usually university students that are coming to me, they're kind of feeling like a little lost. They're
Mm,
unsure of what they want to do, or if they want to major what they want to major in. Or honestly, like a lot of the times it's kind of a buildup of like stress from school, but also stress from like relationships and sometimes even dating.
yeah.
Because it's that
Yeah.
time of life where you're juggling, you're trying to like learn the balance of school and having fun, and being a good student, but also maybe dating and like meeting new people and like making friends. You're balancing all of that. Um, and so that can be overwhelming, and you can feel, sometimes we feel a little lost in like, how do I balance all of this? But also like, I almost feel like we're trying to choose the path for the rest of our lives. It feels a
Yeah.
little, I think it feels equally like high stakes of a choice
Mm,
in the decisions that they're making. And
yeah.
then in terms of like the second group, what usually happens and why they're usually coming to me is because they feel burnt out. They
Yeah.
feel like they cannot continue in the way that they're continuing their life and their work,
Hmm.
or else they're going to really like crash out or break down.
Right.
They're really having a lot of trouble like sustaining work and all the responsibilities outside of work. Usually they feel really like nervous and like on edge. Like every day it feels like they're just on the edge of a cliff.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they're trying to kind of figure out what's wrong and how do I fix this feeling? How do I no longer have this feeling anymore?
Yeah, so it sounds like the first kind of people, they actually have a lot of options and their future could be like 10 different ways and they just don't know which one is for them.
Mhm.
So it's the sense of overwhelming. But the second group of people, it seems like their life is already on a set path, but then they just can't go on anymore. And they don't know what to do because if they were to get out of that path, it's like the whole life is collapsing. But in the meantime, if they're gonna keep going down that path, they're gonna collapse, right? So it's a catch 22. So it seems like it's a both very stressful situation, but it's like the stressor is completely different.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. I think, yeah, the second one is like, man, I've put in so much time and energy into this career, right? And this is like something that I've invested in. And now am I questioning if I want to do it? And then it's like, well, what's next, right? And so it's a
Yeah.
feeling of it's a equally high stakes, but it's a feeling of like, man, I really sometimes it's even almost like guilt. Like, did I choose
It's like
the
I
wrong
messed up.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
did I
messed
mess up
up.
my
Did I
life?
choose yeah, I messed up my life. Did I choose the wrong path? And then it's also like a combination of like also dread, like really dreading what they're doing and dreading continuing on this path.
Yeah, that gave me chills. So before I go on with my questions, I just wanted to share something personally too. And I think that I didn't know that there are so many people struggling with the same thing. Like when I was growing up, like the first thing I studied in school was computer science, and even though I won some national scholarship, I don't even know how I won it. Honestly, like I hated the discipline. I just didn't want to do it. And even that time, when you're 19 years old, you already spent a year or two into this thing. And to walk away is still a lot of years that like you're thinking, oh, I need to, my peers are advancing their academic, career and I'll need to start from scratch. Like that, to me, that few years sound like a lot of sunk cost already, right? And even though I decided to change major, like I was thinking about what I like was that practical. Like the time I liked industrial design, but I was looking at all the designers, they work like 20 hours a day, even when they're students and they're not paid that well. So, with my Asian brain, I was thinking, that's such a bad return on investment. Sorry if there's any designers out there. I know that you love your career, but like at that time I was like, like what if I cannot pay, because my parents were paying for my tuition fee, and I was like, what if I just, study something and it's not a high paying job? I felt like the amount of guilt towards my parents. So I was like, let me study something practical, and I chose business. But the first year of working, management consulting, I just felt like at that time I was already burned out, right? And like remember my friend at the time, he was like, Crystal, you're burned out a few months into your job. Like, how could you even do this for a living? And I didn't know whether it was because like this is how the world is. Like this is the real world, and I just need to grow up and tap it out and be a professional, and ignore my feelings, or I should. This is actually something I don't like, and I think that at the time I was in such a denial, so I didn't want to admit to myself like I actually don't like this, because like that would be admitting to myself that the whole time I thought I had control and I was managing my career and academic,
Mhm.
studies. Like I was fooling myself, right? I was making a compromises to a degree where like even the end result was not something that I was happy with. So I think it took me a long time to truly be honest to myself, and I always thought that, oh, I must be one of the rare ones that is, like a rebel out there, because it seems like everybody else got their shit together, like it seems like they can be a good professional, like Like I didn't know that it was such a common problem, amongst people.
Yeah, it's so common. And I get that same exact like thought process with almost everyone that I work with. Like, oh, like why does everyone have it all together? Or like how come everyone else can tough it out and like deal with like adult life
Yeah.
and real life and I'm here like struggling and I don't like what I do, but everyone else does. Like that's and it feels weird. Like it feels like you're the only one.
Yeah.
And that's because I think a lot of people do a very good job in like toughening it out and like being and like pushing through even if
Yeah.
they don't like it. And I think it's a mix of feeling like, oh, well, realistically, we're not going to love our job 100%. But it gets
Hmm.
to a point and there's a level where if you hate your job or you're dreading it or you wish you like didn't have to go to work every day, like then it's like it's a little then imbalanced,
It's a
right?
clear
And then
signal.
it's like almost like do we need to be questioning like if we can do this long term and if we really like it? But a lot of people do a really good job and like just keeping it all in is really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if that's a message that your parents or like other people were sending you growing up, you're like, gonna work hard and you don't like what you do, it's just a job, so many messages, like mixed messages that was presented to you perhaps in your, subconscious level, then you just take it as truth, right? So like you're almost finding yourself in this process too.
Yeah, it's a little bit also a mix, I think, of like Western culture versus Eastern culture, right? In terms of how we think about what a job is. I think a lot of the times more Western culture is you love what you do. You do what you love and it's your passion and you should wake up and like love your job. But also there's a mix of sometimes that's not realistic. And for a lot of
Hmm.
people, job is stability, financial stability and income. And we do need a job to have a living, to pay our
Definitely.
bills and to have a roof over our head. So sometimes I think it's a mix. We're raised, I think a lot of Asians are raised of that stability and that safety is very important
It
because
comes first.
it comes first. And I think, but it makes sense why it comes first. A lot of, and I'll speak to like kind of Asian Americans, right? A lot of our parents as Asian Americans came to the United States sometimes with nothing or starting over. And that stability and that safety is absolutely important.
Hmm.
It's part of
Yeah.
survival. And so, our parents come over and they work so hard to be able to give us options and privilege and so that we don't have to worry about safety and security.
Right.
We don't have to worry about where money's coming from or where our next meal is coming from. And so that messaging of like, oh, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer so that you make enough money and then you don't have to worry and you don't have to feel like insecure and unsafe.
Yeah.
That's a lot of where that messaging I think is coming from.
Yeah, and just to kind of second to that point, I think that even in Asia, because I live in Singapore, even in Singapore, it's not the US, and then people still like the Chinese people there, they're still, like generations ago migrated from China, right? And in Malaysia too, and they still have the same, very similar mentalities. And because I think they're also very conservative, right? Because that's just part of the traditions, and it got passed down to the next generation. The same thing to China for different reasons, I think, is because the Chinese get richer recently, right? So in the last like 50 years, like if you look at China's GDP 30 years ago, it was Western African level, right? And then to now, it's, middle class. So that change is so drastic. So like the generational gap is huge, right? So the older generation, how they think about things is also very like self-preserving, right? Like I gotta, be stable. And I think like I don't know whether you agree with it, but I think that there's also a huge component of status in the Asian culture and what
Yes.
they define as success versus failure. Because if you truly only look at stability and money, come on, there's like so many other occupations you can choose from. You can be a blue collar worker, you can be, I don't know, like, there's so many occupations. It doesn't need to be only doctors or lawyers, right? But like, why do Asian parents want us to be, I don't know, one of the five options you can choose?
Yeah, that's a yeah, that is interesting. I think, and I don't know, I'd be curious, like, doctors and lawyers are it is a high earning career, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of like doctors, there's a lot of healthcare workers. I mean, healthcare workers, it's one of the most stable jobs, I think, because we will always need healthcare workers to an
Yes.
extent.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about, well, my son like saves lives, right? Or my son
Yeah.
went to school for an extra 7 years to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
his
They're smart.
degree. How does that like, that just says so much in terms of like status and how it's not an easy degree to get, and not everyone
Yeah.
has a degree like
Yeah.
that. And so
Yeah.
I think part of it is like that pride and, well, look at them, look at my son, look at my daughter who's like put in so many years in school and has studied and worked hard to get this degree that not everyone has.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. My daughter or son, they're like, top number one in school. Like
Yeah.
that's they outbeat everyone,
Yeah.
right? So, continue our topic here. What psychological fears? I think that we touched base a little bit on it. But what's based on your experience, what fears often keep your clients or perhaps the cases you've seen stuck, even when they know it's not right for them to continue the path that they are on?
Yeah. I think a big one is just that honestly, it's like really scary because you don't know what it's going to be like next, right? And I
Yeah.
think realistically, it is scary. Like if I decided, oh man, I'm going to drop this whole investment that I've been in something that I've been doing for years and years, what am I going to do next, right? Like, well, what happens if I don't make it in that next career? A career
Yeah.
pivot is scary because you don't there's no guarantee that you're going to get a job that maybe is paying as well. Maybe you won't get the praise that you used to get from friends or from
Hmm.
family members for this new career that you want to be in. You have to maybe even start over, right? A lot of people have to
Yeah.
start over. If you're going from a doctor to a creative, that's totally different. And depending on
Yeah.
what kind of creative you want to be or what kind of art, like even if it's in the arts, sometimes you might have to start over. And so it's really scary. And I think that
Yeah.
is probably the number one thing. I think for all of us, when we have a change, when we make a change in our lives, it's scary because what
Hmm.
we go into next or what that path looks like, there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of things that we cannot control too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, human beings are wired in wanting to have controls, even though at a certain age, I'm like, I don't think I'm that old yet, but even now, like, I'm like, control is an illusion, right? And the more you let it go, the better it will feel just to kind of live life in general. And, you won't feel as stressed as well if you know that you can control almost anything. Or maybe you can only control the process, not the result. So, how can somebody begin to untangle what they want when they've lived their whole life based on what they should want? Because that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that is sometimes, yeah, one of like the main themes in therapy is trying to figure out, right, like what we really want and how we really feel without
Yeah.
like all this outside pressure from society, from our family, from our friends, maybe from like even the communities that we're in. And so I think sometimes it really is just one. I think the first step is learning how to listen to what your heart and your body, and I say like your gut is telling you. And sometimes
Hmm.
that starts from just like learning about our feelings and really thinking about, okay, like how are we feeling? The reason why I say that is the reason why it sounds like it's such kind of a basic thing is because when we grow up, oftentimes we don't really learn to like trust our gut or like listen to our gut and listen to like how we're feeling. It's usually about like how other people are feeling, and the way we respond to that.
Right.
We gauge how our parents react or how our teachers react, and then we respond to that. It's not always like, oh well, I feel this so I'm going to do that. It's like, oh well, they want me to do this or they feel like this so I'm going to do this or that. And so
Hmm.
sometimes we have to go to down to basics, and we have to kind of learn about like, actually I'm feeling this, so that means I want to do this, or I'm feeling this and maybe I should follow that feeling and try this or that.
So let's just say, when a person is extremely burnout, say like a lawyer who worked like 100 hours a week for the
Yeah.
last 3 years,
Yeah.
and they come to you and they're like, I don't know if I can continue. I probably can't. but I don't know what to do. And at some point, maybe they're like numb, right? Because they got to
Mhm.
survive all the intensity, or maybe they're so stressed they don't even know how to access their own feelings, and they also don't know which one, like what feeling is reliable, perhaps, right? Because like when you're very stressed, like you just wanted to get out, but like, so what is the truth in this mid of a mess?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the tricky part. And I guess that's where my job comes in. Because I guess, like, what my job really is to help you move from like this survival critical mode when we're like stressed and burnt out. We're just kind of surviving. Right. And so we have to kind of, our first steps is to get you down from that like survival mode and into like, let's start taking care of ourselves. Let's try to find like this rebalance of how we're
Yeah.
feeling, so we get down to like kind of our base level of how we're feeling. Once we're not
Hmm.
stressed and like burnt out, then we can kind of reevaluate, right? And we can think about, is it that maybe I don't like this job right now because I'm so burnt out and I could not keep going?
Yeah.
Or, but I still like what like this topic is, or I like this career field. It's just I was really burnt out. Or, okay, now I'm not burnt out and I'm like at my median, like my normal, and I'm realizing, and now I can think about, actually I really don't like this field. And it's not because I was
Right.
just burnt out. I just really don't like this and I want to be doing something else. So my job is to kind of get us to that point and help us get us to that point so that we can really reflect on, okay, like, do I really not like this job, or do I really not like this career? Or is it that I was just burnt out and that's why I wasn't liking it?
Right, right. And I think the message to take away is that you should never make any decision when you are in a survival mode, or like kind of fight or flight, stress out, anxious mode. You really needed to regulate your nervous system first, and then get to a point where you have a little bit of space to see what exactly is going on. Because if not, then you might actually just make another mistake, because you wanted to get out of the stress instead of thinking clearly.
Yeah, I think like, I don't know if you've ever been in the position where, something happens and then we feel like we're in crisis and we start like even like crisis applying to different jobs, or we think, oh
Yeah,
man, I can't do this anymore. Let me like job hunt, or
yeah.
let me go to.
Let me do another 10 things to get myself out of here.
Right. Yeah. Okay, like where can I go next? And it's such a panic like kind of state, and we're not regulated. Like our nervous system is like super flared up because we're in
Yeah,
panic mode. And so I think realistically the reason why we want to make decisions when we're not in panic mode is because for a lot of people, and for a lot of people that I see, we're in our late 20s, in our early 30s. It's not realistic to just quit, and then it's not always realistic to just quit and try to figure it out.
yeah,
Oftentimes we have to make decisions and we have to make choices so that we're not like leaving ourselves hanging, or we have no job and no income all of a sudden. That's not
yeah, yeah.
realistic for a lot of people.
You need to plan and you need to be strategic about it, right? You can't just be like, screw everything, I am leaving and you can't find me anymore, especially when you maybe have responsibilities like dependents, and you can't just do whatever you wanted to do anytime you want to do it. So like, if there gonna be a management, right? Management of this situation going down. And for that to happen, you need to be calm, right? Otherwise, you're just gonna go with instinct. And I think that I've seen cases where people, when they reach to their mid age, their 40s, 50s, and then one day they're just like, screw it, like this is not the life I want to live. And I don't know where. Maybe it's because they're so burnt out. Have you seen situations where like maybe a person was way passing that stage of like, I can even regulate it. I don't even want to manage it. I'm just going to leave because I can't take it anymore.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It gets to a point, I think, where people, yeah, people reach that limit and they just say, screw it. And they leave, they quit. I've had students even just change their, like, meet with the counselor the next day, just change their major. And
Yeah.
it's like a really quick decision. And I think like for some people, whether or not they knew it or not, that's what they really wanted to do. And for some people, it's like they get to a point, they already know that they want to quit their job, usually, or
Yeah.
usually they already know they want to change their major, but they needed that like really intense feeling to just do
Mm,
it. And
Mm.
so that I think that that does happen too. I think people that there are there are people with the privilege to be able to do that too, where
Mhm,
they
mhm.
can just all of a sudden quit and maybe they're not too worried about like their finances or maybe, you know, they have enough savings or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I've also worked with people that did not have a plan and did not have savings and did quit and it's like a it's kind of like an oh shit moment, right? They're like, "Oh, why did I do that?"
Yeah, yeah. So, with all the cases you've seen, what's the difference between the people, for example, that maybe they realized that, okay, I made two mistakes and I'm course correct, right? Between that and people who are like, I made mistakes and I made a bunch of them continuously for the last 20 years.
Mhm.
And now I needed to turn the whole ship around. What's the difference between these two people in terms of how they think and how they feel?
I think it could be kind of a few different things, but I think maybe if I were to generalize it a little bit, you know, the people that kind of catch it earlier on, because what I'm hearing you is like saying what I'm, you know, the two different people in terms of one person is maybe like making one or two mistakes and they course correct, you know, and they catch
Yeah.
it earlier on versus like
Yeah,
someone
and then
that
they
is,
continue doing that, right? So, like,
yeah.
maybe they make mistakes, but then they will always correct it on time versus, too late.
Yeah, and I think a couple things can happen where maybe they I think some people might have that like oh shit moment or like that light bulb moment earlier on and they they hit their limit earlier on and so then they're able to course correct and they're able to recognize earlier on, "Ooh, this is not for me." And so then they
Yeah,
can kind of course correct or sometimes with that category, like with those type of people, they might have a little bit more insight into how they're feeling and what that
yeah,
means. A
more
lot
in
of
touch with
times,
their feelings.
right. And it also takes a lot of, I think it takes a lot of like bravery and courage. You have to be kind of ready to say, okay, I was wrong and I'm not going to give in to like maybe all this pressure that I might feel. And I'm just going to do what I want to do. That takes a lot of insight. It takes a lot of bravery and courage to do that.
Yeah,
And some people
100%.
just get to that point a little earlier on versus the people that maybe get to that point later on in their careers or in their lives.
Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of humility to do that too, right? Because to admit that you made a mistake and don't take it personally because everybody makes mistakes. The best thing you can do is just to correct it. Like there's a saying that if you realize you are, on the wrong train, what you do? You get off the next station. You don't just ride the train, right? So I think that is it takes a lot of wisdom to be able to do that. And also, I think that maybe, people who have done this course correction a little bit earlier in their life, once they have done it once, that they know how to do it again and again, right? Versus if you haven't done this and the stake is so high when you are much older, you're like that fear becomes a baseline because you're fucked if you do it, you're fucked if you don't do it. And then you are in this limbo state because that's safe, right? Temporarily. And
Yes.
then you don't have the skill set to be like, well, can I do this without, like completely screw myself over? And, as much as these people who maybe have more confidence in their own ability to handle these situations.
Yeah, that's totally right. I was going to actually add too that for a lot of people, one thing that I've noticed is that the people that kind of course correct earlier on and maybe are more willing or like ready to like say, I'm going to pivot, those people I think have had experiences in the past where they're a little bit more vocal in like what they want, or they're a little bit more vocal, like even with their family of like, oh no, I don't want to do this or I want to do that, or
Yeah,
you're wrong, I'm right. They're a little bit more, they've had that practice of like speaking up for themselves
yeah,
and following through with like what they want to do. Just
right.
maybe in different terms, like in not maybe in career terms or, but like little things here and there, even growing up, right? When we're kids, there are moments where we can stand up to family or have different opinions and express our different
Yeah,
opinions or
yeah,
challenge different opinions. And so,
yeah,
so The people that I have worked with that maybe have course corrected a little sooner, they have that experience and they feel comfortable to an extent of speaking up for themselves or like pivoting if they need or challenging kind of the norm and going against maybe what's expected of them.
Right. They have a strong sense of self. And, maybe that's a little bit more ingrained in them than, maybe the latter group of people. And I wanted to know, why is it so hard for high functioning Asians to even realize they're unhappy? And high functioning and high achieving in particular, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It kind of reminds me of, a lot of the times with my work with Asians who are like high achieving or do really great like academically or even like kind of high income earners. One of our things that we do and one of my like basic things that I introduce is like different types of feelings. And the reason why I do that is because I think oftentimes we're not really taught as kids, at least for my generation, like we weren't really taught like, oh, these are all the different types of feelings and you can like have
Hmm.
all these different types of feelings and it's not just like happy or sad or angry or what's a big one like if you have an attitude, right? It's not just like these basic ones. There's so many different types of feelings, but we don't really get taught to sometimes like reflect on those feelings and like ask myself. It's not, I wasn't taught to ask myself, are you happy? If you're not happy, let's do something about it.
Hmm.
I wasn't taught that. I was thought, okay, like I have all these responsibilities and I have to do these things, so let me just do it. It doesn't matter how I feel about it.
Right, right, right,
And so
right.
I think a lot of the times we don't realize that we're unhappy because we don't think about if we're happy or unhappy.
It's
Or
it,
good.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because, how is that going to help you achieving the result, right? Because that's what we're taught to do.
Yeah, it's like, if we have a good paying job, if we have a good job, if people like give us praise and like congratulate us for the job and the lifestyle we're living, it doesn't matter if I'm happy, I'm achieving, right? It's very like external. And so a
Hmm.
lot of the times we have to like run it back and we have to learn, like I said before, like learn about like what are our feelings inside and what does that tell us about what we want out of life and what we're okay with and what we're not okay with. So
Right,
it's almost going back to basics of like teaching ourselves to think about, oh, like, are we actually happy? Or are we just kind of like covering it up with all these layers of like achievements and success and praise?
right. I wanted to play devil's advocate
Yeah.
here because I think the past me had these questions in my mind when I was trying to go through that process of untangling all these things. And the biggest fear I had was that, why would it matter? So even if I were to learn all these feelings that I have myself, what if one day I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do all these things anymore. I don't want to achieve anything anymore. Well, these feelings help me. Like, what is a tangible result I can get from feeling these feelings? They're inconvenient, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good one. And I think then it really becomes a question of like if we feel like our feelings don't matter and it doesn't matter if I'm unhappy or not, then I think that's okay too. Like some people prioritize their career and how much they make over how happy they are or
Yeah,
um how like they feel fulfilled in life, right? It's more about like that stability and that security and
the
how much they're
function.
making, right? And if that's the case, then okay, great, right? Then that's it. And that tells me like maybe then you're okay with that level of like maybe unfulfillment or like kind of unhappiness that maybe you're just kind of shoving down. And if you are telling me that you can shove that down for years and years and years and it's not going to bother you at all, then great, right? Then we don't
Yeah,
need therapy or and you're good, right? And so
yeah,
they can choose that. I think it just realistically is a question about how long can you sustain that for. If you think
yeah,
you can
yeah,
sustain that for the rest of your life, good for you. But
yeah.
for a lot of people, they can't.
They can. And I think that my observation is that the ones who are even thinking about these things, they actually can't. The ones who are thinking about these things, maybe they can, right? Because like once it enters your awareness, like it just started to grow. Like it's not gonna shrink, it's not gonna be smaller. Like tomorrow you see another person who perhaps went through the same journey, but they chose differently. They didn't suppress it, and now they're happier. Then you're gonna wonder, like, what if I chose that, right? What if like I did that? Like, it's life is very long, and the earlier you do these things, the better it is, because that just means you have more time to live in alignment and happiness. And I just think because there's times when I talk to people, and some of them tell me, like, I think when there's a point when the fear is so big, then they'd rather to not find out what happiness is like. It's a little bit tragic, but I think some people, they don't know if they can even overcome that fear, and it's because they haven't seen what the happiness is going to be like. Once they do, they'd rather to not take that the first step, because to them, it's just not worth it, right? And how do you, I guess, persuade these people to let them maybe imagine a different future?
Yeah, if they choose that lifestyle for them, then great. But I think you're right in that most of the time, once they are getting that like sprinkle of feeling and self-reflection, I almost like think of it as like this seed that grows and
Yeah,
grows and maybe it stays there. And it's kind of reminding me of like, sometimes when people like jump into therapy for the first time, it can be like really scary going
very
into
scary.
your feelings. And like
Yeah.
now you're given this opportunity and this space to really think about the thing, like hard things that you're unhappy with. Like we don't like to think about things that we're unhappy with. And if that list is really long, it's even scarier and like even like yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that I was unhappy with all these things. And
Yeah,
now I know about it. And it's sometimes
a
it's so,
failure.
yeah, sometimes it's so scary. They're like, no, I don't want to go there. And then you try therapy and maybe they're not ready. And so then they leave therapy. But, oftentimes I think they go back to therapy eventually because that they've gotten that sprinkle of like thinking about really how truly happy they are or thinking about their feelings. And once you get that sprinkle, I think it is hard to kind of like it takes a lot of work to shove all those feelings down.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
energy and effort.
yeah. And then so this remind me of there is an analogy where essentially something like when a light go through a dark room, it lights it up, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't matter how little of a light there is, because it's powerful. Like the happiness is powerful in the long term, maybe not in the short term, but I
Mhm.
think that once you have enough space, you realize that you actually want the light. You don't want it to stay in a dark room.
Mhm. Mhm. I think those, like, we've been saying kind of like those oh shit moments, those are just as powerful as like the aha moments.
Yes,
Sometimes it's
yeah.
a aha and we're really happy about it, and sometimes it's like a oh shit and we're like, "Whoa, this is scary." Like this realization can be scary.
Right, right. And I think that this is the first level of thinking. The second level, once they go through that ocean moment, is that, oh, you know what? Like, it's great because now I can change my life for the better, right? Like, it's not that, oh, like, I am screwed permanently. Is that, oh, now I realize that the real reality of my life. So, how can I make it better? And that process, even though it's painful, is beautiful, right? Because oftentimes for a lot of people, it's like the first time they ever do anything for themselves in their life. Like, so to like I've gone through that process myself, I guess, a few times now, and it sucks, when you are in the middle of it, because you don't know what's gonna happen, right? So that's the most scary part. But when you go through it, you're like, I'm so grateful of everything I've gone through, and even the darkest moments, I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. And like those moments, I think even in like therapy, in the therapy world, are like those are the moments that we like as therapists like thrive off of. We're like, yes, we're feeling good. We're feeling empowered. We feel like we can do it. Even if it's hard, we have the skills and we feel like we can do it.
Yeah.
That confidence grows. And it's not just like confidence. I think like it's also the trust in yourself grows, the belief in yourself grows, and it grows and grows and grows. And even if like hard things happen at that point, it's like, okay, yeah, I got the skills to do it. Like I can work through this, right? And I feel good
Yeah,
about
yeah.
working through it. Getting to that point can sometimes take a really long time. And like you said, like it can take a lot of work, and it's sometimes it feels like really awful to be in that moment, but that that end feeling of like, oh yeah, actually I believe in myself, or like I can do it even if it's hard and this is worth it. That feeling, I think, like sometimes overshadows all the challenges that you've gone through to get there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like once they started to be on the journey, it will only get better. And I think that's also what I've noticed about myself after going through this journey is that like your anxiety level and your depression started to reduce. So in general, right? I used to have general anxiety disorder. And that's because I want to control everything and anything. But once you started to have confidence in yourself, in your ability to handle the uncertainty and know that uncertainty a part of life, then all of a sudden I wasn't anxious anymore. Like I don't even remember when was the last time I was super anxious, which is just wild. I'm pretty sure it will come back sometime. But it's just, like it's almost like your energy levels elevated in general.
Yeah, if we kind of think about it, right? Like when we're like feeling dread and we don't want to go to work or we don't like what we're doing and we feel stressed and we're burnt out or we're anxious about like going to work and we're anxious about doing this for the rest of our life because we like hate it so much. Like that all adds up and that all affect like everything affects each other. And then on top of like not liking our work, oftentimes there's like imposter syndrome. Like we feel like, am I even good enough to do this? Okay. Then you start questioning yourself, like, am I the problem? Like there's so many things, there's so much self-doubt and like
Yeah.
sadness and dread and anxiousness and burnout that goes into this one scenario. When we remove it and we start feeling good about ourselves, oftentimes, yeah, then everything else gets easier because we're feeling good about ourselves. We're feeling confident. We believe in ourselves. We're trusting ourselves more. We're trusting in
Yeah.
the choices that we're making more. We're going to feel good. We're going to feel better about a lot of things because even when hard things are coming at us, we're feeling so good and we have so much confidence in ourselves that the hard things don't even feel that hard anymore.
Yeah, it's a foundation, right? You build a strong core, and different people have different stress levels when they perceive the same thing, right? So, like, what's the difference? Is perhaps one person, is just a lot more sure about how they can handle and how, like their interpretation of the event is probably more positive than the other person who's more anxious and stressed. If this conversation sparked something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're building a more true life, not just more impressive, we would love to hear your story. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Asian Rebel Club and join our newsletter for more ways to connect. Link in the description. Until next time.